So welcome back. Welcome back. So let's talk about offshoots and plantlets because that's going to be something very important. So if you remember, throughout the class, we've done several methods of propagation. So we've done cuttings, taken a piece of the plant and processing it with the rooting hormone, striking it in a rooting media so that eventually it will get roots, and those roots will now be able to support the plant, and this cutting will grow into a healthy, happy plant. So we have done that method of propagation. And hopefully this is what we are going to be looking at. A very nice root system with lots of very healthy, happy roots that will now provide all of the benefits or all of the provide the plant with the necessary things that can be found through or in the soil. And then we have done the juniper or the conifer cuttings. Those will be taking a lot longer to root, but be patient with them. So they will eventually root within a few more weeks, and then we will then transplant them into some kind of growing medium in a container. And then we did the air layering. So we went around and found pieces of plant or a branch attached to a plant. And there was some kind of wounding done with the knife. And then a rooting hormone was then placed on the wound, covered with some kind of coconut core or moss or some kind of moist substrate, and then cover with a plastic to act like a greenhouse and keep the humidity in. Those will take much longer to root, and so we will get to look at them later on in the semester or maybe next year. But I wanted to show you some that those air layers in action. So here is a nursery by the name of Mimosa. And those plants that you see in on the cart, those are longan tree or longan. And they are propagated through air layering. So from Arizona, I guess there is a farm, and in the farm there's large trees, and they just go through different branches, and they will air layer them, and then those will get shipped to some of the nurseries. In this case, Mimosa Nursery, where they get placed in a container, and those will now be available to the public for purchase. And so that is the air layering in action. And then we have also done root cuttings where you went around and you have dug up some roots, hopefully from the selected groups of plants. And I mentioned that because not all of the plants will lend themselves to this method of propagation, but the selected few, you got the roots, you wash them, cut them into segments, and then transplanted them or plant them in some medium. And so with the root cuttings, we would like for it to develop a brand new bud that can grow into a new shoot or the new shoot system for the plant. So with the stem cuttings, we encourage them to develop roots. With the root cuttings, we encourage them to develop shoots. And so that is the opposite. And this will happen. This is comfrey, which is one of the plants, selected plants, and there's a beautiful root system. And out of that wound, there is a brand new shoot. And so what happens at some point in a selected area, the cells from the plant will revert. They will revert back to an embryonic stage, and they are then reclassified or reconditioned to now turn into a bud and have a new growing shoot, and that is what's going to give us a new plant. So the plants do have that ability of taking their cells and changing them according to what they need or according to some of the modifications that we can do to them to help them along. And then we're gonna start doing some kind of division. That is gonna be done with many other plants that can grow in like a clump. And so here we have an example of an aloe plant, and we have shoots stems that come from the ground. So there is an underground stem that we can see. It's just going to grow a couple of inches, and then a lateral bud is going to then send out a brand new growing plant, which is going to be one of those new rosettes uh, for for the plant. And so we have that. And then the other method of propagation that we have done is the plantlets, and that's what we're going to concentrate a little bit more. So it is a method of division, but in this case, we have a fully formed plant. So the example of the pineapple would be the best because pineapple will be primarily propagated through the plantlets that are given by the plant. And so there is a point in this case where the cell from a selected areas of the plant will transform into an embryo. It'll transform into an embryo, which is then going to begin to grow right out of the flower spike, in this case with a pineapple, or with other plants, it'll be at the margin of the leaves or at some other points within the plant, even some of the leaves or stems. So fully formed plants that are ready to just be separated from the parent plant and placed to grow in some kind of growing medium. And so here we have that pineapple. And so we have the top or the crown that is already a fully formed plant. When that gets separated from the fruit itself, you can peel back those scales that are underneath, and then you will see the roots that are already preformed. Here's where I have done that, and you can see some of the roots already coming out here. And so you would put that pineapple when you first remove it from the fruit on top of a table, let it callus a little so that it's not going to mold. And once it has dried out, now you can take that pineapple and now you can put it in some kind of growing medium, and the roots will then begin to grow and the pineapple will grow as well, eventually giving you a fruit in several years here in Southern California. So this would be the best example of a prop plant that is propagated primarily through plantlets, and that is very important for economy and economic important. And so here are those plantlets. So the fruit is going to be on top, and underneath it, there will be two to several plantlets that will be produced. Once they harvest the pineapple, then they'll take those plantlets and they will plant them in the ground to replace the parent plant, keeping in mind that pineapples are going to be a monocarpic plant that will die right after it has finished setting the fruit and or the fruit has been harvested. So they have to replace it every single time that is there's a pineapple by given by a plant. So that plant will die, needs to be replaced. And so here's the pineapple itself with some of those extra baby plants that are coming right out of the stem, the flower spike. So once again, just a cell turned into an embryo, grew into a pineapple, and that's all we have there. And that's when you separate those baby plants, and then you plant them. The other example, and keep in mind, there is a selected group of plants that will lend themselves to this type of propagation. And so here is donkey ears, a type of calanco, and calancos are going to be good for that. And so the calanco has baby plants on the margin of the leaf. So here's just a leaf that broke off from the plant and just laid on top of a table, and eventually the baby plants will germinate and they'll just grow out of the leaf itself. When you look underneath it, the baby plants already have a growing shoot and they already have a root system. So there's no need for you to manipulate them any further. All you gotta do is separate them from the leaf, plant them, and they'll grow into individual plants. And here's a different calanco, which is known as mother of thousands. And throughout the leaves, you can see tiny bumps, and that is where at the tip of those bumps, that is the cell that turns into an embryo, and eventually you see hundreds of baby plants given by one individual, and those will fall off. They already have the root system, and hopefully they will give the plant another opportunity to flower and or fruit, and that's important. So this is a survival mechanisms. It is very difficult for some of those plants to get seeds to survive long enough for them to become grow into a plant and produce a new generation. So because they're monocarpic, they're going to die. They have to clone themselves naturally so that some of those clones will continue on trying. Eventually, somebody is going to be lucky and a seed will germinate in the right location, grow to adult, and continue on with the species and the genetic diversity. But in the meantime, every single plantlet that is produced by this method, natural method of the plant, is going to be a clone or an exact genetic duplicate of the parent plant. And here's a close-up of a different calico showing you several babies on the tip of the leaf. And a different calico here just throughout the margin. You have already fully formed baby plants and the close-up of those. Now we have many succulents that will have aerial roots. This is not an example of a plantlet. This is just the ability of some plants to just generate new root system. Once again, a cell in the right location, in this case in the stem, will revert and turn into a root. But that's not a plantlet. That is just a stem that has developed a root. Yes, you can cut it and plant it, but that is not going to be considered an offshoot or a plantlet because it's not a fully formed separate plant from the parent. The other very important crop propagated through this method would be strawberries. So there will be many nurseries, many growers that will grow strawberries. And once the strawberries begin to produce the offshoots, they will then harvest those, put them in boxes or bags, and ship them to different growers. The strawberries are going to have a stem that is going to be known as a runner or is going to be known as a stolon. The stolon is this stem that comes from the parent plant that is planted on top of the cinder block. And so you have a stem that just going to grow a little bit far from the plant. And at a certain point, there is going to be that cell that will turn into an embryo and germinate into a baby new plant or a baby strawberry. There's already roots, there's already shoots. That is a completely different plant. And so here's a side view of just that. You have the roots. And so while it's still being fed and cared for by the plant because it has a connection through via the stem, the plant is going to be fed until this plantlet is able to reach the ground or touch the ground, root into the ground, and be able to fend off for itself and survive. And the same thing will happen with the spider plant. So it also has a very long runners, and in this case, it's going to produce dozens of baby plants at the end. It is one of the characteristics that people makes this plant desirable, and people will grow it because they want a spider plant. So that would be another one that is normally propagated through the plantlets. And so here's the end of that runner or the stolon, and there's the roots and there's the shoots. So a completely formed plant, and or the basket flower or basket plant, Calicia fragrans. And so you have the main plant, and then you have the runners. Once again, it is a monocarpic plant, so once it flowers, it will die, but the baby plants will ensure that you have more plants. And so here's once again the end of that runner, and the baby plant already formed at the tip, and the baby plant already developing their root system. And the walking iris. The walking iris that also has very long runners, stolons, and at the end you have baby plants. So they can also flower. So this will be a flower spike or a spot flower at the end of this stem. And it also gave you the baby plants. Or more important is going to be the agaves century plants. So here, some of them growing out in the middle of nowhere, and they'll flower a couple of years. And right out of the flower spike, you have hundreds, if not more, babies out of one single flower cluster. And so we have here a close up. So you have some of the fruit that is probably bearing some seeds. And then there's going to be throughout the flower cluster itself many, many, many babies. With the wind, they'll get knocked to the ground, or here's where we harvest them. So there's the flower spike or cluster, and you can see where the baby plants are coming out from that. And you take one of those individuals, you peel back some of the old scale or old leaves to expose the roots, plant it, and that's all. And another member of the pineapple family, this is Talansia Secunda, or a type of air plant. And the same thing, so it will live for many years, and then it's going to decide to flower. When it decides to flower, or after that, it's going to create a lot of baby plants throughout the flower cluster. And so each of those can become a brand new plant. And here's the close-up of those individuals. So you just need to snap them from the flower spike, peel back some of those scales, expose some of the areas where the roots will come out, and that's all you need to do. And even the orchids, here are epidendrum orchids that are going to produce what in the orchid terminology is referred to as a kiki, or means a baby or a child. And so we have a flower spike, and at a certain point, there is a baby plant with fully formed roots, and there are three found on this flower spike. So orchids can also do this without any manipulation. And so here is the side view of the baby plant. So you can easily snap it, separate it from the flower or the parent, plant it in its own container with media, and that plant is set to go. Or the pregnant onion. So that would be another example, ornithogallum, or a plant that in between the layers, it'll have cells that will turn into an embryo and grow out to be a tiny little ball. And so we have the baby here underneath, and one that came from peeling back some of those layers, or some of those onion layers that you may see there. And so here it is when it's still attached to the parent plant. Later on, we are going to do some leaf division or leaf propagation. And so here is umbrella plant. It's a water plant, but it's known for baby plants to also be produced when the leaf is placed in water. And so here's a perfect example. You have a leaf that simply drooped, came in contact with water, and new baby plants emerge right out of the leaf. So that will come also from leaf propagation. And so here's the side view, perfectly formed plants, perfectly formed roots. Just snap them, separate them, plant them, and they're set to go. And here's a close-up of the. And so that concludes our wrap-up. So a overview of some of the propagation that we've done, as well as uh, overview of the separation or division of plants by offshoots or plantlets. Take care. Bye bye.